Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Ash Beckham, welcome to the conversation today.
So excited to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Colorado. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about your recent book, How to Live with Courage and Become an Everyday Leader. It's a real pleasure to be with you. We actually sat down and chatted maybe a year or so ago, and it's great to have a chance to sit down again, talk about your recent book. And I love this idea of becoming an everyday leader. I truly believe that every single one of us is a leader. We should take on that mantle of leadership because we have an opportunity to influence others in a positive way and to be leaders and agents of change in our homes, in our communities, in the workplace. And so we're going to unpack all of that and explore your book together in this conversation. As we get started, I wanted to share Ash's bio with everybody. Ash Beckham is an inclusion activist whose TED Talk, Come Out of Your Closet, became a viral sensation. Her intrepid, relatable, and intrinsically comical style has made her an in-demand speaker, including events at Microsoft, Lockheed Martin, Bank of America, and the keynote for the first LGBTQ conference at Harvard University. And that's just a snapshot, tidbit of Ash's background. Ash, anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
Well, I think just riffing off of what you had said earlier and what leadership looks like is that it's in our everyday lives. So I feel like now some of my most challenging situations is as a parent. So I have two little boys, 6 and 4, and they challenge me every day to try to be that person that I set myself out to be. So I feel like so many of these things, like you said, it's not like at the end of the day we get our laptop or leave the office and we're a completely different person, right? Like, how does that authentic style of inclusion radiate in everything we do? How we show up everywhere consistently, right? It becomes less of something we do than more of who we are, and I think that's what we're all striving to be.
Yeah, who we are at our core, right? And
Right.
that's hard. That's tricky because that then becomes, I mean, nobody's perfect. And I have all these espoused values. I have all these espoused and aspirational goals, things that I want to be, things I want to become, and things I'm striving for. And I know I fall short. And especially when it comes to home life and when it comes to family, those people you're around more than anyone else, they're the ones that they get to see every side of you,
Right.
the good, the bad, and the ugly, and sometimes the parts you're not so proud of. And so, like I feel like at work, I'm able to often be my best self at work. And even when times are really tough, I'm able to, be that brave, courageous leader. At home, though, that's where I let my guard down because they're my people. It's my safe space. And sometimes when I'm letting my guard down, that's when I allow myself, in a way, this is a good thing, right? Like I feel safe, I feel vulnerable, I feel comfortable. But then that means I sometimes end up doing things I'm not so proud of, or I say things I'm not so proud of, or I respond or react in ways that isn't so positive. Things that I regret later, and I think we probably all can relate to that. We probably all have those instances, and it's sad because it's your family. Like that's
Sure.
the people you probably want that to happen to the least. Yet that probably is often the people that it happens to sometimes the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is, like you said, it's having that safe space. I know, they always say that you have kids that go into the parent-teacher conference and, the kid will be an angel at school. And you want to double check and make sure they're actually talking about your kid, right? Because they come home and they completely melt down. But that's the idea, is that you work, and no matter if you love it, no matter how engaged you are, if you're your best self, right, it can be so performative, and you need that place to kind of let go. And it also matters the most, right? Like the people at home are the ones that you care about the most. When you do say something hurtful, it's challenging. It has repercussions. You can't walk away from it, right? Somebody doesn't get transferred to a different team, right? Like it is, you're kind of stuck with each other, which I think is the amazing part about it. But I think with so much of this personal work, right? Like we always want to be moving up and to the right, right? That is like our constant striving. And I think that we all do that, right? If you're putting in the time to do the work, to be the better person, to go back and repair when we make those mistakes, I think we're inevitably moving up and to the right. But I think for any of us, that's not linear, right? If you zoom in on
Mhm.
it, all of those up and to the rights are a little bit up and a little bit down, and a little bit up and a little bit down. And I think that that's where we are showing and demonstrating growth, right? Like that's where the growth comes. It's from the setbacks, and what do you do after? Right? What do you do when you make that mistake? And that can be personally, that can be professionally, right? When you have that setback, when you're pushing your boundaries maybe and you overstep or misstep, right? What do you do then? I think that determines the kind of leader that you are, because I don't think any of us want our leaders to be perfect. The people we look up to
Yeah.
are never perfect, because that's just unattainable, right? We want to be relatable. So we need to know that, yeah, they misstep too. This is what it looked like, and this is what they did next. I think that's our biggest learning moment.
Yeah, yeah. It is how you respond when you have those missteps. And, I'm thinking about the people you care about the most are also the people who often are able to like push your buttons the most, right? Because they
100%.
know all the little bits, the most vulnerable parts of you. And it's not even intentional. It's not like we go around trying to push each other's buttons. It's just you've lived your lives together and you see every little part. Anyways, that's not we're not having like family group therapy here or anything, but the point is we are everyday leaders, and it reaches every aspect of our lives, right? And we can't just check it at the door. It's not just at home, it's not just at work, it's not just in our communities, in our neighborhoods. And I find that really empowering. I find that really exciting that we get to practice um, and grow in our leadership capabilities everywhere we find ourselves, and that we don't have to have this expectation of perfection, and we don't have to have this expectation of perfect linear growth. And in fact, that's it's a facade, and it's actually damaging, when
Hmm.
we portray that. And there's plenty of people who do portray that, and it's not actually helpful to their cause of trying to both grow and create buy-in with the people that they're trying to lead.
Absolutely, because I think there's not just one way to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
That's it's how do you lead personally? Some people, are their natural state is the big, boisterous, loud kind of Pied Piper, right? And that's great if that works for you. But if that's not you, you don't have to change who you are to be a leader. You lean into the strengths that you have, right? Personal connection, empathy, what those things look like, right? I think that that's the most important thing. And part of the reason that I wrote the book was that anybody can be a leader. It was from the C-suite executive to the bench warmer on the sixth grade soccer team, right? Like
Yeah.
you can lead from wherever you are. You just have to see yourself that way. I talked to so many people when I would do speaking engagements, and they would say, "Oh, Ash, I loved what you had to say. When I dot dot dot, I'll be a leader. When I get that degree, when I have that many direct reports, when my budget line hits this." Right? There was this waiting to lead by some sort of external verification that you have hit the point of having this title, having these letters after your name. And the idea is that's not the case, right? You can be a leader of one. How do you show up? How do you have a conversation with the person in the grocery store? How do you reach across lines when there's a disagreement, right? Like, how do you enter the world every day? Because I think you never know how people see that, right? When you reach out to the person in the meeting who nobody's heard from yet, right? When you make sure all voices are heard and represented, that is a leadership style. And so to think that there's this, history of cisgendered white straight men that are
Mhm.
leaders, and you have to be above 6 foot tall and all of these things that society has shown us and told us, I think we are redefining what that looks like. And if you see leaders that don't fit that mold, they are authentically leaders. Do they do things that are outside of their comfort zone? Naturally, of course, you have to, right? But they own the type of leader and the style of leadership that they have, and that is part of their personal brand. And I think our goal is to empower people to do that, to see what leadership looks like in their skin.
Yeah. The stereotypical leader that you just described, it's laughable, it's sad, like that's what comes to mind for people, and that's really what we push forward as leaders for generations, for centuries, right? And only now that we're starting to get away from that. Did you know that the first president of the United States to be elected, the shorter of the two candidates, was George W. Bush?
Oh my gosh, that is
That was the first
wild.
time in the history of the United States that the shorter of the two candidates won. And even that, not to get too political, but we know that that was razor thin, right? And even that
Sure.
was like contestable, and it went to the Supreme Court and everything
Yeah.
like that. It could have just as easily been Al Gore. And so like it's crazy.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy that we got like, that far into our country's history before the first shorter candidate became the president. It's nuts.
Right. Exactly. It's unbelievable. And I think that it takes strong people to have conversations like that to say, I don't need to be that to lead. And again, not only the skin color, the stature, all of the things, but is it a are those styles of strength and power necessarily inherent to you? Because I think to truly lead, we don't change ourselves into the leaders we see out there. We become our version of what leadership looks like.
The other thing I wanted to mention before we can dive more specifically into the book, you mentioned how all of us can be leaders. We can develop those skills. We all should be leaders, in my mind. It's also so it's something for everybody. But I also want to note the flip side of that is the fact that we have people who are in leadership roles, like formal leadership roles. They have the title. They have people reporting to them. They have control of budgets. They have power. They have influence. They have all those things that we typically think of, as who a leader is. And we all know people who have all those things, the trappings of leadership, and they are not leaders. They don't
Absolutely.
they don't do the things that we would say a leader would do or should do. And so just like sometimes we don't think we're leaders because we don't have those things, we don't have the title, we don't have the position, whatever. But that's not true. And we can be leaders. But just because you have those things, just because you have the position, the power, the title, whatever, that doesn't mean you're a leader either. That doesn't mean that you're actually utilizing those things in a way that's actually being helpful, healthy, productive, utilizing them in a way that's lifting others up the way that a leader should.
Absolutely. I mean, just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you should lead the division, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's what happens so many times is this like merit-based ascent with little to no training of what it actually means to manage a team. It is so far beyond just leading by example, right? Because if you want to have a successful team, you need to surround yourself with people that are not like you, right? If you're going to have this creative spark, if you're going to talk about innovation, you need diversity of thought around you. So you can't have a bunch of mini-me's running around managing your team. And that means you have to interact with people that are motivated differently, that strive differently, that see you have to be able to lean into that. And there's so much individual personal management that comes with that leadership that isn't necessarily the job you've always done and been phenomenal at. So how do we support those people in what that new job looks like?
I mean, we've already started to touch on some of the core premises of the book, but let's dive in more specifically now. Obviously, everyday leadership is something that is foundational to the book. Let's talk about the courage piece.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so important to live with courage to be that everyday leader?
Yeah, I think it's so important because I think we have to do the things that are uncomfortable, right? Whether that's an uncomfortable conversation, whether that's pushing our own boundaries to truly be a leader, we have to kind of run up against that fear factor on a regular basis to grow. In the same way, if you're working out, you have to break down muscles to have them grow, right? And continue on. We do that same thing in our leadership style. So you have to be able to get to the point of feeling that fear and doing it anyway. And that courage isn't the absence of fear, that we're never trying to get to the point of not feeling fear. To me, that's this very, animalistic internal sense of I am outside of my comfort zone, right? And to have that awareness to know we're doing the right thing, right? It's to feel that fear and do it anyway, really is this idea of courage. And that's something that we can practice again in these everyday moments, because only then are we kind of raising that threshold. We kind of push against that ceiling and then that becomes our new floor. But we have to put ourselves in situations that are low risk, right? To be able to practice courage. So again, do have that uncomfortable conversation. Do that thing that gives you, whatever, whether it's butterflies or whatever you have in your stomach of like, oh, and then moving forward anyway, we can experience that every day. We just have to be aware enough to know the things that we're not naturally shying away from, right? To not have that be our default. And so I think because I think it takes courage to be a leader. I think it takes courage to be a leader every day. Again, at work, it's fine. You have the title, you can do the things, you have the backing, you have the tenure, you have whatever you need to have that. But how are we having that conversation in our communities, right? On our school boards, in all of these places where we might come up against a little bit of pushback, and how do we deal with that? Right. I think that is where that courage piece comes in. It's something that we should and can practice every single day, and not in the, you're not, fighting a grizzly bear every day. It's not that idea of this extreme version of proving courage. It's not gladiator, right? It's that doing the things that we'd rather not do because they're awkward or uncomfortable or sensitive or whatever it is, right? To me, that's courage. And again, the more we practice it, we build up this historical knowledge of things that we've done and things that we've pushed through. And that's what we rely on when the next scary thing presents.
Yeah, I like this notion of practicing courage. I don't think I don't think most people think of it that way. I
Sure.
think most people think of courage as something you have or you don't have,
Right.
or something that in the moment will manifest or it won't. And
Mm-hmm.
it's you kind of just deal with it, and you have it or you don't or whatever, right? But yeah, I think it's a muscle. Like you can practice it, you can strengthen it, and like you said, if it's low stakes, then you can kind of dip your toe in the water. And you can
Exactly.
start to realize that things aren't quite as scary as you thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
If you're worried about speaking up, for example, do it in low stakes types of situations, whether it's for
Exactly.
yourself or you mentioned, the world is made for straight cisgender white dudes like myself. So, maybe I'm not so worried about speaking up for myself,
Right.
because all the systems are made for me. But maybe I can then use my privilege to speak up for other people, for other
Exactly.
groups. And maybe that makes me nervous. Maybe I'm not sure how to do it. Maybe I'm not sure how to say things correctly or whatever. And so I'm nervous about it. Okay, so I dip my toe in and I start to try. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I fumble. Maybe I say things wrong. Maybe I just don't do it correctly, or I talk over people, or I just do it in the wrong way or whatever, right?
Right.
Okay, I try it. I learn. I do it better the next time. I realize the world doesn't end. I realize like I can do hard things. I can it's not as bad as maybe I thought it was going to be. It's not as uncomfortable as I thought it was going to be. Like we catastrophize things in our head. We know when we think about how fearful things are, and sometimes they're that bad, but most of the time they're not that bad. They're not
Right.
nearly as bad as how we can imagine them to be. And so once we start to try things out, then we really can grow that muscle. And all of a sudden, practicing whatever that action is, what used to be so nerve-wracking, anxiety-ridden, and something that made us so uncomfortable and anxious, now, you can look forward a year or two later, something that now you're completely comfortable with, something that you actually really can lean into, and something that you're happy to be involved with.
Absolutely.
I see that happen all the time with people who really will take on that mantle of just trying something and leaning into their courage and uh, exercising, their role, whether it's a formal role, informal role, or whatever. So we don't need to just sit around waiting for some moment to manifest our courage. Like we can start it today. Like we can start to exercise it today.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think exactly what you're saying. Courage is a verb, right? You have to like do the thing. To practice courage is to do it. It's not something you have, right? It's something you do. And so, the good thing is you only have to do something the first time once, right? And then the second time becomes easier, and the third time becomes easier, and the fourth time you don't even think of it as a thing because you've kind of gained this knowledge along the way, right? You never have to. You dip your toe in, you dip your foot in, right? You can
Yeah.
ease into it. It's not, again, like you said, it's not this kind of absolute, either you have it or you don't have it. You're growing it. And it isn't, it isn't this brute force. There's so much nuance to it. And you have to kind of lean into that to broaden your breadth and understanding of
Yeah, yeah. And when we find ourselves, in organizational settings, it can take a tremendous amount of courage to push back against the status quo, to push back against people in positions of power, especially if, it could potentially hurt my own chances for advancement,
it.
getting
Mm-hmm.
that next promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm worried about retaliation, losing my job, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe that's all in my head. Maybe those fears won't manifest. Maybe none of that actually would have happened. But certainly we worry about those types of things, right? When we try to speak up or do courageous things in the workplace. And so, yeah, it takes courage. At home, maybe it takes courage. It could hurt our relationship potentially. Like there's always potential outcomes, and we don't know the future. We don't know how it's going to play out. And so, yes, it takes courage. But I think as you practice and as you start to exercise the muscle, you'll start to realize that more often than not, a good faith effort will result in a good faith, outcome. Um,
Absolutely.
because people don't expect you to be perfect. And, as long as I'm making that good faith effort, even if I fumble a little bit or it doesn't come out exactly the way I wanted, like in an organizational setting, if I'm making that good faith effort to push back against the status quo, even if it kind of ticks some people off, and even if I do it in not the perfect way, at least people can see I'm passionate. They can see that I have the best interests of the company at heart, that I'm, it's coming from the right place. Like ultimately, I'm not naive enough to think that it's never going to hurt you, but I think more often than not, you're going to be okay. And
Absolutely.
if you're not okay, and it's one of those instances where it does come back to hurt you, it's probably not a place you want to be anyways, right?
Exactly. That's the thing. And at the end of the day, like you've strengthened that muscle. No
Yeah,
matter what the outcome is, positive, negative, whatever happens on the other side, you have strengthened that muscle and you're taking that with you into the next time you're going to delve into that, right? And that's why we're saying low stakes, right? You're practicing it, you're figuring out how you're going to deliver it. You're going to come with a kind heart. You are going to have the best interest. Like I'm not saying, at the all company staff meeting, you raise your hand and call out the CEO, right? Like that isn't necessarily, I mean, that would take a tremendous amount of courage, but is that the way to get to the ends that you want? Probably not.
yeah, yeah,
It is very scary to send the email to the CEO's assistant to say you want to set up a meeting because you have some challenges. That's almost scarier, right? But I
yeah,
think that there are these ways that we do it, and that was, the part of the book. I mean, they always say that what when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the idea of this was to make a toolkit for inclusive leadership that sometimes you need a little bit of empathy, sometimes you need a little bit of courage, sometimes you need a lot of grace, right? Like, how are you figuring out exactly which one of these things you want to use based on that situation? Because in the idea of everyday leadership, it's going to come at you in a bunch of different ways. And the way you're going to show up for your family is completely different than the way you're going to show up from your direct report or your client or whatever it looks like. But you have this toolkit to draw from to bring together the right pieces to be the leader you want to be in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Ash, this has just been a really fun conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go and get on with your busy day, but before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Absolutely. So you can go to ashbeckham.com. You can buy the book there or through any online retail seller. On social media at Ash Beckham. Same with LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find. And I guess as far as, let's see, I mean, just based on our conversation, I would just encourage everybody to do one thing today that scares them, one thing that makes them nervous.
Nice.
One thing that
Nice.
makes them uncomfortable, and start practicing that courage. I know everybody can do it. Like you said earlier, it's always so much scarier to think, like thinking of anticipating is always so much worse than doing it. So I would say just jump in and do it.
Nice. I love it. Ash, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Ash can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.